Could you please introduce yourself and your journey into getting to where you are today?
Sure. My name is Santosh Govindaraju. My journey has been one that's I consider myself very blessed to have had great family members be good influences on me along my journey. And one of the key elements that I adopted was that I always embraced what older, wiser people had to say. I embraced it. I didn't feel a need to always attack it. It's very natural to think, oh, with the older people, they don't know better. They grew up in a different time. That doesn't apply to me. It's easy to use that as an excuse, but if you really take the time to listen, you'll find that they help you and guide you in ways. It may not be perfectly like relevant to your situation today, but the principles are the same. And so if you say, I'm going to focus on the principles and not the actual stories, I'm sure you may have heard, like my father would have told me like, oh, he used to walk 10 miles to school every day. Yeah, we're not walking 10 miles to school here in America, but the principle is the dedication and the commitment and not allowing obstacles to get in your way, right? That's a real universal lesson. So I always listen to the universal lessons and the advice of older people, not the actual exact example. So I always had a thought process where I thought about things universally and not literally, right? We have to look at the figurative meaning, not the literal meaning. And so oftentimes, and as a child, I noticed other children writing things off because they only thought of the world in a black and white linear way versus the, what the lessons really were. And so I actually grew up in an environment where education was really important. Excellence in education was very important. And I just said, okay, that's just the normal. And so I dedicated myself to excellence in whatever I did. And that was I had a family friend who advised me one time, be the best or be the worst. No one remembers number two. And so I took that to heart and always focused on being the best. And I've had a handful of things that were a big part of my journey. I want to say athletics was a big part. It was in athletics that I learned that I am my own enemy. I am the only enemy. There are no any other enemies other than my mind. And if I can conquer my mind, I can conquer the world. And I ran competitively in cross country and track, running sub 5 minute miles, sub 10 minute 2 miles, and 15 and change 5Ks. Um, and what I learned through there was that in cross country and track, like the more you train, the more you are disciplined, the better you get. So I went from being barely the number seven guy on the varsity team my junior year to being number one my senior year, and it was just through dedication. And becoming, a really intense runner was the result of me realizing that I was the only enemy, and I took that same approach to my academics. And so I graduated from high school here locally, I have a public high school, into Gaither High School. At the time, Florida was 49th in the nation in education, just ahead of Mississippi. And I was lucky to get into an Ivy League school, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to get crushed here. But then my championship sports mentality kicked in and said, no, you know what? I'm going to be number one. And that's what happened. I became a top student at Wharton because I realized the only enemy I had was going to be myself telling myself that I'm not good enough. And as soon as I said to myself, I am good enough, I conquered, the most elite business school in the world, and had the highest scores on the tests. And it wasn't because I'm smarter than anyone else. I'm definitely not, but I will outwork anybody else. And so hard work has been the essential element in my journey, that there is no obstacle that will come my way. I will just outwork anybody. And so and that's what most of my friends, colleagues, and everyone know. Like, I've built a reputation of being intimidating because they're like, that guy will outwork you. Don't even try, And so, but I went on to Ivy League school from high school here. In high school and in college, I did cross country and track. I was also big into theater. And people said, well, why would you do theater? I said, you don't understand. We're always on stage, especially in business. And I said, we're always presenting ideas, pitching ideas. You know, how do you fake it till you make it if you don't know how to fake it? Which is acting. And so, and what I do even to this day is I act every day depending on what role I'm playing. I have to think, am I acting like a dad today? Am I acting like a boss? Am I acting like, a servant? Whatever it might be, I know my role and I play that role. Um, and so from Wharton, I went on to Wall Street. But when I was at Wharton, I knew that I wanted to work for myself. But I got a job on Wall Street to prove that I could get a job anywhere I wanted. And I was working at a top firm, one of the most elite firms, but I did it just to show people I can do it. And then I left after a year because I don't want to do it. And so I wanted to do my own thing, which is start my own company. And so in 1998, I started my own company investing in commercial real estate. But while I was at Penn, I was also passionate about film and theater and things like that. And so after some time in real estate, when I turned 40, I went back to film school at UCLA to learn film producing. And since then, I've produced 10 films, 10 feature films with many, many, famous Hollywood stars you may know of. But the key thing was I chose UCLA because I also learned from my Wharton experience that life is a lot easier if you have a strong academic pedigree. So people never question me about my knowledge of business and finance because all I say is I went to Wharton. They're like, oh, okay. No questions asked, right? And same with film. I was entering new territory. So I said, you know what, I'm going to go to the best place. And the choices were NYU, UCLA, or University of Southern California. And UCLA just had a more fun campus for the summer. So I chose UCLA. And now today when people say, well, how did you get into film? I said, well, I went to a producer's program at UCLA. And they go, oh, okay. And so I get past the whole, like, people want to know, do you know what you're doing? And so going to a top academic institution, having strong academic pedigree, I think is essential in cutting through a lot of the barriers. And so, but I've always been an idea generator. I've been a believer, an optimist, and so I do a lot of venture capital as well. And all my ideas are entrepreneurial, and it comes from the optimism and faith. And so that's another part of it. I mentioned sports, but also faith and spirituality are a big part of it because I believe that you'll see that in every champion, faith is the essential element that makes a champion a champion. How does a team go, and a football team go from being down 27-0 and then coming back in the second half and winning the Super Bowl? If you don't have faith, you can't achieve those kind of results. So faith, great role models and parents and family members I listened to, and sports were a big part of the journey. And then going on to strong academic environments.
That's amazing advice. Thank you so much. So what are some of the most important things that you did as a teenager that helped you in getting where you are today?
So I think definitely sports was a big thing. What happened was the summer after my junior year, I trained hard all summer, and I was number one on my team. But when I was in races, I would always come in number two behind another team, not on number one on my team, but number two in overall race. And one day, my coach said, "I'm going to tell you to kick it, which means run as hard as you can at a certain point in the race, and I don't want you to stop until you cross the finish line." I was like, okay. And one time, he did that. I kicked it, and I won the race. And what I realized after that was that I'd always come in second because when I was a junior, there was a kid who was like so super fast. I always thought he was number one. And so in a race, every time I caught up to him, just behind him, I would ease in and not give my chance to win because I thought in my head, my mind had told me he was number one. And sooner, realizing that it was my own mental constraint that I placed on myself, nothing external was the limiting factor. I then was able to apply that all throughout my life. Now, I think that good cardiovascular training is really important too, because I believe that a lot of my ability to transfer that into academics and other things is that I had endurance. When I say I can outwork anybody, it's because when you can run 8 to 10 miles and think that's nothing, not even feel tired, you have real endurance. And so any effort requires strong endurance. Like today, I'm in the office right now doing accounting, and accounting requires a lot of endurance and patience and you break it down into steps. So just like when I'm going for an 8-mile run, I break it down into 8 1-mile segments or 16 half-mile segments. You get really good at math, 16, 32, 64, like you start knowing, like, let me break this down and accomplishing one part at a time. And then in my head, I'm doing, okay, 6.25% done, 12.5% done, and all those different things. And you learn that breaking things down to small steps, small accomplishments is the key in tricking your mind and giving you endurance,
Mm.
But the cardiovascular fitness too, it feeds so much of our mental health and other resiliency factors. And so I think cardiovascular fitness with sports and a dedication to strong academics were one of the most important things.
Okay, that's great advice as well. So I know that you have 3 teenage sons. So what other advice would you give to teenagers like them?
So I think the key things is that the same advice I was given when I was young is like, be the best or be the worst. Focus and dedicate and choosing what your passion is and being the best at it. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. And so really focus on the 1 or 2 things that are most important to you and focus on being the best at those things. And don't worry, like you might say, well, I have this interest, I have that interest, I have that interest. you have plenty of time. You're really young. You have plenty of time to pursue everything, but pick one or two at a time and give it your all. Don't try to do everything at once. I don't believe that multitasking is healthy. I think multitasking leads to multi-failures. And so by having single pointed focus on one or two things will really help you achieve greater results and satisfaction from your work. Whereas if you do a bunch of things halfway, you know, you'll never feel that real contentment with your efforts, because you'll just be average in a lot of things. So pick and focus and be dedicated to it and think about all the other people competing against you to be better than you. And every moment think, I know I'm going to be the best at that.
Mhm. Okay. So what is the importance of confidence, and how would you recommend that teens attain confidence?
So yeah, confidence building, it takes time. And I think, like I said before, it starts with faith. You have to have um, strong faith and calmness that, Rome wasn't built in a day. It takes time. And so, but one of the things you can do as a teen is making sure you're surrounded by good people, being really conscious of being surrounded by people that are good influences on you, because positive people around you will be your first part of confidence building. I think there's a feeling of acceptance that we want as teens, that you want to be around people who accept you for who you are. And the more that you can you, be the original you, the more confident you'll become. If you are around people who you have to pretend to be around, to be cool, to be accepted, you'll never have that inner confidence because you're not being yourself. So surround yourself with people who you will thrive in being you, right? So those two words, be in environments where you can be you.
Mhm.
And how can we be confident if we're always pretending to be someone else that we're not, right? So if you're around people who allow you and encourage you and make you feel great about being you and not someone else, that's the first step. And just cut out the rest. You don't need to be around people that you have to be fake around. And so I think that's a very, very important element of inner confidence. And then the second part of it is the commitment I made to myself when I was 16 or 17 years old was that I'm going to live life with no regrets. If I have a thought about an idea that I want to pursue, I'm going to swing the bat and go for it. And so, because you don't get a second chance sometimes. And so, I just make a commitment to yourself that I'm going to do things with no regrets. And the key to doing that is to not listening to your mind. Don't overthink things. So I have a saying, and that is, in the battle between your heart and your mind, let your heart win. Your heart knows, and there's another saying they say, your heart knows today what your mind knows tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay. So, oftentimes later on you think about things and you're like, oh man, I should have done that. That was the right thing to do. Well, your heart knew that back then.
Yeah.
It's just your mind got in the way and confused you and made you think all these thoughts. But again, if you're surrounded by people who you're comfortable with, who allow you to be you, you'll be in an environment where you'll allow your heart to give you the answers and guidance and not your crazy mind. We all
Mhm.
have crazy, stupid minds. Okay. So, but the truth is always in our hearts. So be you and let your heart win.
I know that you do a lot of charity work, such as being in Ukraine and assisting people there. So what is one of the key things that you've learned from your charity work?
Yeah. You know what? One of the things is when you serve in a totally servient capacity, the universe blesses you with way more than what you're giving of yourself. We give completely of ourselves, but in return, you gain a lot more. The most powerful lesson that I gained, I'm getting goosebumps as I talk about this, is in Ukraine was we were delivering food packages in a village to displaced Ukrainians. And this woman just starts crying. And she looks at me and I go up to her and she says, I'm crying tears of joy. I'm not crying because I'm joyful for the food you're giving us, because that'll go away in 2 weeks. But she said, I'm joyful and grateful for the fact that complete strangers would come to a country in a war and help other complete strangers for pure goodwill. Your presence, you showing up here, will stay with me for a lifetime, my entire lifetime. I'll never forget this moment. And so that understanding of presence, showing up, really hit home to me. And I summarize it and I apply it today in my life here back in Tampa with three words: just show up. When you know that someone is in trouble, they may not ask for help. Most people are too proud to ask for help. But when you know someone is in trouble, just show up. On a Saturday night at 9:30, I got a call from my father that my uncle was in the hospital. It was probably something small, minor. I was like, okay, Dad, I'm gonna go. And I showed up at 10:30, and my uncle was like, you didn't need to be here. You didn't need to come. And he got discharged an hour later. But I was like, no, it's okay. I just want you to know that I'm here. And by showing up, even though it was not an emergency necessarily, it worked out okay. Showing up uplifts other people's spirits, and that upliftment results in like your own their bodily systems healing faster. You can help someone heal faster by just showing up. You may have a friend who's going through a difficult situation. High school years are very challenging, right? Emotionally.
Mhm.
Just show up and say, and don't try to give advice. Just be present. You don't need to give advice. Just be present and just say, I just want you to know I'm here. That's it. And that does very subtle uplifting that any words can't replace. You could text somebody, "Hey, I got your back." Doesn't do anything. Just show up. That's the biggest lesson I learned
Mhm.
in training.
Yeah. So I know that you're a partner at an investments firm, you're a film producer, you're an active charity worker, and that you have a young family. So how do you manage your time efficiently?
So it actually comes back to what I said earlier about single pointed focus and being present. When you're in the moment doing something, don't multitask. Focus on what you're doing. Now, one of the things I did though, when I was 17 years old, I was introduced to a form of yoga called Kriya Yoga and meditation. And I noticed that it took a while, like maybe like 6 months to 9 months. I don't know when it happened. When I was a junior, when I started doing it, and after a while, I noticed a change in myself. I noticed that like I would, I did it because my uncle introduced me to it, and I just did it blindly. And all of a sudden, my concentration levels increased significantly. I could understand something the first time I read it. I don't have to reread things anymore. I read it the first time and I get it. But by sophomore year and junior year, I'll be reading things 3, 4 times to get it. And then after this meditation, my concentration levels opened up deeply. But I think it was a combination of my running and cross country and track, which increased your body's ability to absorb oxygen, and therefore your brain and mental faculties are just like supercharged. And then the meditation quietened my mind, allowed me to have great focus. So when I'm focusing on business, I'm focusing my brain on business methodology. When I'm focusing on film, I'm focused on creative methodologies, storytelling. And when I'm with my family, I'm focused on being a dad, a husband, and a son with my parents, and loving them with that unconditional love with them. And so whatever I'm doing, in that moment, I'm delivering super impactful efforts and results because I'm focused. I'm not doing two things at once. I'm focused on that one thing and being present. So I think there's some training things like the yoga, meditation. For me, when I go running, I'm getting both the cardiovascular, but I'm also in a meditative state, being alone. I'm getting my me time too. It could be with people going to the gym. It could be other things too. But the more relaxed you become, the more ability you have to concentrate and focus. So whatever I'm doing with great intensity in that moment and being present.
Okay. So my goal with Terrific Teens is to assist teens in developing lifelong confidence. So what advice would you give to Terrific Teens in order to achieve its mission and impact more teenagers?
So I think that lifelong confidence comes from a variety of activities. Even when I was in Ukraine, that's what we were doing, is working on the spirits of the refugees, keeping them positive and having confidence despite being in a war and their homes being destroyed by the Russian military. And so a big part is, you know, finding groups, like I said before, about being around people that are like-minded and bring you up. I would say the most important thing is advice I'd give to terrific teens is create social engagements. Find ways to bring people together, encouraging them that terrific teens is a safe space where you are expected to be you. Don't be someone else. Bring out the best in you and engage in other activities, icebreaking activities, arts activities, singing, dancing. The arts are a great way to bring out and connect people with their real selves. There's deep connections between the soul and music. In the medical field, they've shown how music can help heal people through its vibrations and stuff. Well, you don't have to be sick to be healed. You can actually be healthy and be strong, get stronger. The same music that heals can actually make you stronger. So I would say find ways to be collaborative, bring music, other team building activities, and creative elements like that encourage people to be themselves, be the real selves, bring out their hearts and throw out their minds. And so I think social engagements that include some creative elements, and there are a wide range of artists out there who are great facilitators of this. I'd be happy to recommend to create some fun group sessions. But I think interactions really make the difference.
Thank you so much, Santosh Uncle, for that amazing message. I loved everything that you said. I actually made a list of the top 10 things that I took from your interview. Here it is. At number 1, we have embrace what older people say. What you said was don't focus on the story because the story is going to be different. Your parents are always going to tell you, I had to walk 10 miles to go all the way to go to school. Well, you're not walking 10 miles anymore. But I love that if you just take the universal lesson of the dedication that people have to education, you learn a lot. The second thing that I loved was that you don't have to be smarter than everyone. You have to just be able to outwork everyone, and I love that. The third thing was having faith in spirituality. And I mean, the best example I saw was the 2017 Super Bowl that you gave. Amazing example. I remember watching that Super Bowl and the Tom Brady on the Patriots, and they were down by a lot. And then halftime, they came back so many points. I just love that example, and it shows how important having faith in yourself is because you can get anything done if you have faith in yourself. Number 4, we have strive to be the best you can possibly be based off of yourself, not others. If you always look at others, that sets a limit for how far you can go. If I'm in boxing, well, I can only be as good as the number 1 boxer. But if you set the limit as of yourself and how much potential you have, then there is no limit. You can go as far as you want and you can succeed as much as you can. At number 5, we have find your passion and be the best at it. In life, you shouldn't follow what other people are doing. That's a herd mentality. Instead, what you should do is you should find what you enjoy, what you love, and be the best in the world that you can at it. If you love swimming, be the best swimmer in the world. If you love basketball, be the best basketball player in the world. But whatever you do, be the best at it. At number 6, what you said about multitasking leads to multi-failures, it really relates to me. What you said was you should have a single point of focus, and I think that is very, very crucial. At number 7, I love this. Confidence comes from having faith. You said that Rome wasn't built in a day. I think I 100% agree, and it goes back to the 2017 Super Bowl example you'd given. If you have faith in yourself, that is what was going to give you confidence to do whatever it takes to get the job done. At number 8, we have surround yourself with people where you're accepted, not tolerated, so that you can be yourself. What you said was if you can be yourself, then you can it gives you the confidence to be able to go out there and say this is who I am, and instead of being tolerated, like yeah that's fine. If you're with people where you're accepted, you will be able to be yourself as much as you can, and that will give you newfound confidence that will assist you throughout your entire life. At number 9, we have in a battle between your mind and your heart, let your heart win. That is something that is extremely, extremely crucial. Because at the end of the day, your mind might want this, or your mind might want that. But if you find what your heart wants, what your passion is, that is where you will be successful. That is where you will be confident, and that is where you can be a leader. And at number 10, we have something that I think is extremely important. The last one is very, very important. It is that when you serve at your full capability, the universe will bless you with even more than what you are giving of yourself. This is the most important thing, and people call it karma, or karma as I like to call it. But it's really that the more that you give to others, the more you will get of yourself. But you won't if you give $10 to a homeless guy, that's gonna reciprocate into $15 back to you. So serve as much as you can, because at the end of the day, not only are you helping others, you're helping yourself.